Can you explain the relationship between Matt Johnson and the?
Um, I did do a solo album about 5 years ago, which went under the name of Matt Johnson, in which I played all the instruments myself. But when I formed the one of the initial ideas was first and foremost thinking of a name which didn't give any particular musical preconceptions. I think of the name there as being almost like a blank wall upon which I can paint any musical style that I want to. Also, it's began to develop as I've been working on things, and I approach each project as fairly separate, and I gather together a team of people to work on it. For instance, on the Infected project, there is 62 musicians, 4 video directors, 3 co-producers on the musical side, painters, photographers, and all the team of management, promotions, and everybody else working on this team. I see it as being an umbrella organisation almost, and in the new year I'm probably going to form a publishing company, start working towards film, music, and on various levels of films actually, also script writing and film music and scoring, and possibly within a few years' time I might not even appear on the records. There'll be sort of singers, because I'm always on the lookout for new singers and stuff, because I think there becomes a time when you just basically past it, and it saddens me to see people like, for instance, I don't know, Lou Reed or whatever, that become like, I don't know, boxing champions that have not got it anymore, and they're sitting on their stools and they can't get it together, but they're just carrying on because they've got to pay the rent, and they're just uninspired, and they're just doing it purely for the money and for the wrong reasons. And when that time happens to me, then I want to be able to move on to other things. I want to develop the names of into such a powerful organisation that I can just take a back seat and then draft in people when and where I want to.
How did you find making the film for the album Infected?
How did I find making it? Very intense, actually. I mean, the month that I spent away in New York, New Jersey, and Peru and Bolivia was probably the most intense month of my life, for various reasons. I mean, there were a lot of... the reasons that I went there, for instance, was because on certain tracks, like in Mercy Beat, there's a lot of biblical imagery, and in South America you get a kind of a mixture between Catholicism and American 50s Americana and American dream ideas and stuff like that. And you've got a lot of the old Cadillacs and American cars driving about with crucifixes hanging on them. And I wanted to film it in shanty towns, and the light there, and also the tension that it created in retrospect was quite beneficial, because there was a lot of tension for various reasons out there, and at times I just wanted to come home because I was really getting depressed because things were going wrong. But in retrospect, that worked for the advantage of the film, because I think that a lot of tension comes across, and aggression. And I wanted to make the film, but because I've always had a reputation as being this guy that sits in a bedsit with his acoustic guitar and all depressed and lonesome, and that was about 7 years ago, and I'm not like that at all. And because I don't tour, I don't play live, and probably won't for quite a while, I need some strong visual representation, and I've never had that before, apart from the sleeves and the artwork which my brother does. That was the only visual continuous visual identity that I'd had, so I needed to do something which would really do a lot of work for me abroad and all over the world, which would show. And I think that the people that I chose to work with, I think they had a certain amount of empathy with me, and we've really visually represented what the album is about, although there were various mistakes and I would change certain elements, but generally I'm very pleased with it.
Do you see yourself playing a character when you were in the film? I mean, were you playing a young American hero or something like that?
No, I was actually, for each of the films, I thought the most effective way of doing this, because I'd never done any videos before, apart from one years ago, which I didn't have anything to do with. I'd not played live for 3 or 4 years, so I was coming in from the cold totally. I'd been sort of writing in the studio, but I hadn't been in front of cameras or anything, so I was fairly apprehensive about that. But what I decided to do was basically put myself in the mind that I was in when I wrote the tracks. That was the only thing I could do. And as I was going through rehearsals, I was doing things like sort of like press-ups and just like psyching myself up for the parts, and just putting myself, thinking about the actual subject matter of the song and what I was thinking about when I wrote them. And I think I was quite pleased with the results, actually, because they come across quite well. But I didn't try to contrive any kind of acting part. I just tried to put myself back to the stage I was when I wrote the songs. Although in the album there is the character, another Western guy with desires that can't be satisfied. But that is essentially, although there are various manifestations of that on a individual level and on a global level, the effect of, say, the Western influence on the Third World. It's all fairly autobiographical, and a lot of the characters are composite characters from various parts of my life, and a lot of the situations that the central character is in, apart from obviously the American fighter pilot one, because I've never flown an American plane over Arabia, but most of them are constructed from various parts of my life and various parts of my personality, and I'm just creating metaphors to sum up the way that my extremities of emotion, really.
Well, there are some really brutal sorts of images in the film. Are you a bit brutal?
Yeah, I am, actually. You should ask my girlfriend. No, I am fairly aggressive kind of person. I've always been fairly aggressive, and I think it's better to get it out this way than to get it out any other way. But there's a lot of frustration and a lot of aggression, and I found that writing and making films and making records is the best way of relieving that and expressing that. I feel frustrated about a lot of things. I don't sit down and write songs and see something on the news and think, oh dear, how awful, I better write a song about it. But it's a cumulative effect. I mean, I've had the world throwing crap at me for 25 years, and now I'm starting to throw back at it. I mean, I'm just feel the same way that everybody else feels. It's everybody else's right and duty to do the same as I'm doing. And when you're being pummeled by these images from TV, newspapers, people saying things to you, propaganda from all sources and all kinds of moral ambiguities and all kinds of various other manifestations of 20th century living, and I've had it crammed down my throat for 25 years, and I'm just very sort of frustrated. This is my way of articulating it, and I'm just throwing it back very brutally and very forcefully, the same way as it's been thrown at everybody else. It's a good answer for it.
Do you think England is the 51st state of the USA?
Yeah, well, probably Germany is actually, but Britain's probably the 53rd, and then France, Belgium, of course the South American countries, Central America, and probably Australia as well. Although New Zealand's, is it Prime Minister, he stood up for things. I really like that guy. I think he's really good. David Lange, whatever he's called. I think I really respect him. But yeah, generally, I mean, the Americans have taken over the British Empire, and the American Empire is a continual effect of that. But that song was not actually anti-American, it was anti-American foreign policy, where I draw a distinction, because I really like a lot of American values and a lot of attitudes in America. As a place, there are certain things there which are really good. As an individual, if you go there, it's a much more positive place than, say, Britain. But I think it's sad that the way that, particularly during the Thatcher-Reagan partnership, has become more noticeable with the Americans using the... It's proven that we're basically an aircraft carrier. I mean, we all knew it anyway, but that was depressing proof of that fact. And the fact that really we have no veto over whether they use their bases or not, really, no matter what anybody says. I mean, basically, we are fairly much under control. But having said that, there was various threads running through that song. One was a colonialisation of Britain by America. Another one was the destruction of the working class heritage, which I feel quite strongly about, because the song was actually set in East London, where I grew up, and the cinema in it was in a place called Forest Gate, and it's all set around there, but it could be transposed to any major British city anyway, with the Victorian architecture, and there's references to Harold Wilson's speech, "The pound in your pocket is worth more than that," and I said the pound in your pocket turned into $1, and also the quote from the American Civil War, which is the ammunition's been... No, pass the ammunition and praise the Lords, and I changed it round to the ammunition's been passed, meaning the cruise missiles are already over here, and the Lord's been praised, meaning the kind of like evangelist hypocrisy, Christian hypocrisy, which is going on in America and this country as well. So there's lots of different threads, but it's anti-American foreign policy, and it's also about anti-British jingoism, basically saying to people, don't you realise, it's the kind of attitude that is portrayed by the sort of tabloid press, this Princess Di, our National Health Service is better than anybody else's, the good old British Bobby policeman and stuff like that. It's total garbage. People in this country have got this still proud, this pride, which is a hangover from the days of the Empire, where we still think that we are economically on a par with countries like Germany and France, whereas the reality of it is we're a poor country. We're like Portugal. Economically, we've become really polarised as a country, And it's I think if Thatcher gets elected for a third term, there'll probably be civil riots. Actually, there's already been a certain amount, although they've agreed to use rubber bullets and tear gas. But I think that if she gets in again, then there could be some serious problems.
What was the reason for travelling to South America to shoot some
The
of
reason I went to the
albums?
Pacific places in South America, I'd wanted to go there for several years anyway, but the director that I was working with on Heartland, his producer, we were talking about the ideas for Heartland, and his producer said, I've got some great locations. I went to this place a couple of years ago and showed me a bunch of photographs. And I thought, yeah, that's the place for me. And because in England, I couldn't really get, unless we built studio sets or whatever, we couldn't really get the feel for it. I wanted the shantytown feel, just a lot of the feel. And I didn't want to do... You see, a lot of bands, when they do these expensive videos abroad, they go to places like Sri Lanka, the Philippines, or wherever. They would try to... They're basically making travelogues accompanying their music. But I wanted to do stuff which was a bit more sinister, a bit harder, which is a bit more brutal, and which actually... what's the word?
More real, maybe. I mean, it's like film always glamorises, and often film clips for songs take something that is actually poor or downtrodden or whatever, and when you look at it and you hear the music, you just think it just seems lovely. It just seems part of the gloss of Western culture. But what happens when you travel to the Amazon and then parts of Bolivia is that it is a bit storybookish. I mean, you feel as though you're being taken on an adventure, but then again, there's lots of rough and tumble there, and sort of it looks a bit scrappy and more like I'd imagine it really is.
Yeah, I tried to get that across. I mean, I think I failed to a degree in that if my eyes were video cameras, then it would have been the amount of things that I saw there, which we didn't get on film, because we were working to such a tight budget. Then obviously, you know, the film crew want to knock off at a certain time, and you're very restricted, because I was seeing things like, oh, let's do that, and we couldn't do that because it was very tight. But I was pleased with the results overall. I think that we got across the feeling fairly well, and that biblical Catholicism and American sort of decadence, where they intermingle in areas like that, the infection of the West on the third world. That's what I wanted to get across. And it was just a great exercise, because it's the first thing that I've done, the first project like that, and it's given me ideas for the future. Seeing a lot of ideas actually come to fruition and actually watching them back on a screen, it was very satisfying for me, and it kind of totally eclipsed any desires I had to play live, which are pretty much knocked on the head now anyway.
So we'll just be seeing you on film.
Yeah.
Let's go now, coming back to South America, because I must admit it's a place that continually fascinates. Bolivia is one of the places you shot in. It's a very poor place. Now, I believe that the very last song that we'll see, the Mercy Beat, you actually shot in what city? And in parts of that is shot in a jail where
La Paz, the capital of Bolivia. Both tracks, Infected and Mercy Beat, were shot in Peru and Bolivia. Various shots between the two in a place called Iquitos, which is where a Werner Herzog film, Fitzcarraldo, was made, and in La Paz in Bolivia, which is about 10,000 feet above sea level. La Paz is a much more beautiful city. It's almost European in a way, in that it's surrounded by snow-capped mountains. The air is very thin. The sky is perpetually dark blue. You can see the moon from morning till night, and it's got a very sort of clean feeling about it. Whereas Iquitos was very sleazy, very hot, very claustrophobic, and you could feel there was tension in the air from the moment we arrived. It's difficult to describe, but there was a lot of something quite magical about the place. I've been to a lot of different places in Africa and Europe and America and stuff, but never felt anything quite like that. There was definitely a certain heaviness and magic in the air which kind of put you on edge, and the whole thing seemed quite surreal. In fact, when Werner Herzog was making the film, they did a film, the making of Fitzcarraldo, and everything went wrong for him. There was a lot of problems, and to a lesser degree we experienced similar things actually. A lot of tension among the crew, a lot of things went wrong.
How were the people that you were filming? Were they happy to be filmed, or did they feel
They
like
was
being
actually,
exploited?
although at one point in time there's a scene in Mercy Beat where there's the bandstand scene which comes at the end. And we used real Indians for that, and there was witch doctors. There's a guy with a hat on that that you can see in the end of the film. He was actually offering me hallucinogenics and stuff, but I declined. And they were on our side, and we asked for about sort of 30 or 40 people, but of course the whole town turned up. And then there was this communist rally that came marching through with all banners and stuff, which unfortunately we didn't get on film because the cameras weren't set up by that time. And they were going to burn down the rich people's houses on the other side of town, because we were in the very poor part of town. And then they started surrounding the bandstand and saying, "Gringos, the gringos are exploiting you." And all the Indians said, "We'll protect you," and stood there like that all around us. It was bizarre. I mean, it was so magical that whole night, actually. I mean, it was felt so exhilarated just to be there. I mean, you're on the other side of the world, and it's difficult to describe. It doesn't come across. I mean, I think it comes across well, but it's nothing like being there. Being there was it was a very unforgettable experience, really.
So actually, it left you with a sense of positiveness of the people.
Oh, definitely. I mean, in fact, the distinction, the comparison, say, between Britain and the countries that I visited in South America, although the people there were very poor, you got these little Indian women wearing bowler hats and just sitting on the floor and just selling bits in the street, but their faces had a very strong, positive, resilient look in their eyes. Whereas I think in Britain, people look broken, grey and broken and beaten. And that's the sad thing about this country, that too many people are beaten and they're accepting less than what they're worth. And there's a fundamental right to be happy and to be positive. And I think in this country, looking around me, every time I come back to it, it seems to be getting slightly worse. And I've spoke to people that live in other countries that just visit here every few years or whatever, and they just say they notice it just on the way to becoming a third world country almost. But just that attitude, even in a country like that, which is very poor, there's just that resilience, that power in the human spirit. And that is one of the main messages of the album. I mean, the title comes from the idea of infected. The title track obviously has references to things like AIDS as well as other things, when desire becomes an illness. But also the infection of, say, the third world by the West, in those areas where, say, if you go deep into the third world, it's quite pure, and also, say, deep into the West, where it's fairly pure, in the more genteel areas, say, of places like New York or London or wherever. But if you get the areas where they start to intermingle, that's where the problems start. There's that sort of like pollution and the nasty side of things.
To finish, I'd just like to talk a bit about the directors you worked with to make the film. I mean, one of the directors was Mark Ramanek, who did Static. How did you come in contact with him?
Well, it was funny, actually. About 3 years ago or so, I was coming out of a club in New York, and he approached me and said, "Are you Matt Johnson?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, I'm writing a film. Would you be interested in doing some music for it?" I said, "Yeah, sure, send the script over." And he sent the script over and stuff. And we kept in contact from them, and then the film became reality, and he wanted me to score the film. And of course, at that time, I was actually working on the album, and priorities are priorities, and the album took first place. But he did actually use This Is the Day from the last album as the title opening track for the album. And then he said to me when he came to London, he said that if I ever wanted any videos done, he'd be up for doing it. He'd never done any before, but he'd love to try to do one because he really liked my work. And then the video album project became a reality, and he chose his favourite track. He heard the album, he said he'd love to do Sweet But the Truth, so we took it from there. And in fact, we may be working on something next year in a different level, actually, not actually helping him write the film, which will be quite good. But that's how I met him. And Tim Pope, who'd done Soft Cell, Cure, Talk, a lot of good videos that I'd liked. I just approached him and we struck it off immediately. He had empathy for my work, and the ideas that he was suggesting were very close to my own ideas, and that worked very well. And Peter Christopherson, otherwise known as Sleazy from Coil and Throbbing Gristle, with him it was actually a different way of working, because a lot of the ideas in Heartland, Mercy Being Infected, were my own ideas, and I worked with him because of his ability. It was more a co-directing thing in a way, in that he's got very good technical ability, and also was a person that he was very keen to work with me, and I had quite strong ideas about what I wanted to do, and he helped me turn them into reality. So that was a different way of working. And the last one, Angels of Deception, was done with a company called Hydrographics, which featured my brother's work, and my brother designed the general idea of it, and they helped him put it into reality as well. But I mean, overall, there were certain things that I would change, but generally speaking, I'm very happy with the whole thing.
And you will eventually release it as a videotape.
Yeah, it'll come out as a home video. Yeah.
So you can buy Infected on record and on
And
tape.
video and compact disc and book form and virtually the next thing will be food form or virus form, actually. You can do that already.
Thank you.
Thanks.